As it's time to talk with the doc on our 8:30 High Beam this morning, brought to you by Mako's Pharmacy at 240 East 3rd Street in downtown Yorksville. Mako's is your local pharmacy with a caring and knowledgeable staff focused on your health and wellness. Of course, we do that with Dr. Tim McKnight. Hey, good morning. How are you?
Good morning.
I'm glad to see you bringing some snack food along. It makes me feel so much better.
I got a visual aid for all your listeners.
Well, the reason you've done that is because we all have to eat, and there's labeling required on foods.
Right.
And so sometimes they can be a little confusing. Maybe some information that says one thing, but it leads to something else, I guess.
It can be very confusing. You're right. So, yeah, the food companies are mandated by law to put certain elements on their food labels, but I always tell my Fit for Life class that their primary role is to sell their product. So
Sure.
When you look at the front of any particular label, it's designed from the color design to the size of the font to the pictures. It's all designed to sell you a product. And usually they'll put something on there on the cover of this label that will try to convince you that somehow this is healthy for you. So I brought in a small box of Cheez-Its, and the little caption at the bottom says, made with 100% real cheese.
Oh, okay.
As if that's the lure, that cheese is supposedly healthy for us, and that's why we need Cheez-Its. But the color is beautiful here. The Cheez-Its are sort of this yellow-orange color, and there's a couple slices of cheese on here, and then the red background with the white letters. That really catches the eye. That's the first thing. But everything else then is informational, and I think we need to, like you said, it's very confusing to consumers, and so probably the first thing on the food label, if you go down, is the nutrition facts, and it first tells you how big a serving is. Okay. We need to know what a serving is, because everything on the label is based on a serving. The calories and the grams of carbs or cholesterol, whatever we're reading, is based on what that serving.
And we're assuming even a small box like you have that there are multiple servings within that box.
Yes. Now, some people would look at this small box and say, well, I'm going to eat this.
That's a serving.
Yeah, but it tells you there's actually 4 servings in this container, and a serving size is 27 crackers, which seems like a lot, but, when you're munching on these in front of the TV at night, they go down pretty quick.
Right.
And so, you can eat probably a box of these pretty easily without realizing what you've done. So the next thing they'll tell you is how many calories are in a serving. And, of course, everybody's focused on calories. To me, calories are not really critical. I mean, calories are the energy in the food, but if you're worried about your weight, it's not necessarily the calories as much as it is the grams of carbohydrates, because it's the carbohydrates that really decide whether your body's going to make fat or burn fat. And so that to me is the most important thing in terms of weight loss. And then it'll tell you things like total fat, cholesterol, sodium, and total carbohydrates and protein. And I think that's because the consumer kind of wants those elements there, right? And then there's a small section that will tell you the amount of vitamin D, calcium, potassium, and iron. And again, these are vitamins and minerals that we think are important for us, so they list it. And then on the bottom is the ingredient list. And the ingredient list is, to me, where all the detective work is done, because it lists by weight the most prevalent parts of the food. So in this example, the ingredient list in this box of Cheez-Its, the most prevalent ingredient is wheat flour. Okay, now here's what I think is really important, and we'd have to go into more depth in this, but this says enriched flour. Now everybody thinks, oh, enriched is great. That's what I need to be eating, right? Enriched with what? Well, it'll tell you parenthetically that it's enriched with niacin and iron and thiamine and riboflavin. Okay, well, that sounds good, but the reality is in the milling process when they make this flour, all of those vitamins and minerals, most of them are removed significantly. And this was part of the milling process in the early 1900s when people were starting to put these type of foods on the shelf. And what we were finding is vitamin and mineral deficiency in Americans. And we were deficient in thiamine, riboflavin, folic acid, and iron. And so Congress got involved and passed the Enrichment Act, I think it was in 1942, and said, if you're going to do this as you're milling this flour, as you're taking the wheat germ out of the flour, which is where all the vitamins and minerals are, then you're going to have to add it back. And so that was the Enrichment Act. You got to add those 4 or 5 vitamins and minerals back. But what they didn't do was they didn't add back the other trace elements and minerals. They didn't add back magnesium and zinc and selenium and molybdenum and all these other manganese, all these other trace elements. So even though the content of those 4 or 5 key vitamins and minerals is fairly high, it's still deficient in these other micronutrients which we need. So that's one of the things I teach the Fit for Life class is when it says enriched, think deficient, because it's deficient in those micronutrients. And magnesium is the most common mineral deficiency, and this is one of the reasons why. So why did they do this? Why did they do this in the milling process with the flours? Because in 1900, the average American ate 300 pounds a year of grain. Now in 1985, it's down to 150 pounds a year. So we're eating less. But back then, we were eating a ton. Now, if you're grinding your wheat from the fields that you're growing it in and you're eating it fresh, that's got great nutrition in it.
Right.
But if you grind that wheat and that wheat germ then gets exposed to oxygen, it goes rancid. So that's why they took the wheat germ, which is the little tiny seed in the wheat kernel. They removed that with the fats in it that are so good for you, and that's where all the vitamins and minerals are. So they threw all of that out, and now you have it. What you have is the starch or the flour. So that's why I say it's deficient. So you see this in almost every boxed package that they're using enriched flour, which sounds good because they're telling you all the things they've added back, but it's actually deficient in all these other micronutrients.
And that's why we find all those other ones as supplements in bottles on a shelf.
Exactly, yeah. Because, and I think, a lot of times we don't realize that we have become deficient, but somebody has told us that we are. Then the next thing you'll see in this particular label, the next most prevalent ingredient by weight is vegetable oil. Now, vegetable sounds good, right? But when you look at it parenthetically, it's made from palm oil and canola oil and soybean oil. Now, most of these vegetable oils, they come from vegetables. They come from safflower and sunflower seeds. They come from corn oil or soybeans, but they're really high in omega-6 fatty acids, and omega-6 fatty acids are very inflammatory. So the vegetable oils, when you see this on a label, just think this is inflammatory. Mm-hmm. It could make my arthritis hurt more. It can make my inflammatory markers in my blood go up. It can lead to issues with high cholesterol. So these vegetable oils, even though it sounds healthy, they're not really that healthy for us. And it's not that you can't have sunflower seeds or you can't have peanuts, because peanut oil is another vegetable oil. But the omega-6 content is so high that it's a problem. Often what they'll do in these foods, so they can have this box of Cheez-Its on the shelf for a year and a half before it goes bad, it starts to go rancid. It's because they've used trans fats in it, and trans fats prolong the shelf life. We've actually taken a natural fatty acid and we've changed it chemically so it prolongs the shelf life. So that's often what you see with vegetable oil, that it's somehow been changed so it prolongs the shelf life. Because, of course, you want to be able to sell it now or 6 months from now, or you're sticking it in a vending machine. You don't want the consumer saying, this tastes terrible 3 months later. So this is all for their benefit, but the health benefits to us when we change these are terrible.
You may preserve the product, but not your body.
That's right. It ages the body. And then the last problem you'll often see in a food label are the introduction of sugars, particularly high fructose corn syrup or corn syrup. And these sugars come from cornstarch, but the concentration is so high that it's not natural, and it just shoots your insulin way up. It shoots all the inflammatory markers up. It stimulates a hormone in the brain called ghrelin, and I remember ghrelin because ghrelin makes your stomach growl and make you think you're hungry. So it does all these things. It causes your insulin to go up, which will make you make fat. It stimulates ghrelin, which will tell you you're hungry. And, of course, that's great because now you're going to want to eat more of these. Yeah. You can't put one serving down when you're watching TV. The whole box is gone before you realize it. It's part of what happens in your brain. And then the next day you wake up and you think, boy, I overate today. I ate way too many calories. and your brain says, no, you didn't. I'm starving. You got to feed me more. That's ghrelin. That's that hormone ghrelin saying, feed me. So these are some of the common elements. And, of course, the very bottom, they'll caution you about potential food products or ingredients that can cause allergic reactions, because that's critical for many of us. But the whole point of this, and, when you look at these boxes, I'll ask my kids, so where does the Cheez-Its grow? Where do you harvest this in the garden? Like, where does it come from? Traces back to where this all started. And it's wheat products that have been changed so much. We think we're so smart that we can fool Mother Nature and we can do a better job. And every time we do that, we fail. Mm-hmm. So these are not the type of foods we should be eating. Even though we can get a lot of information off the food label, we need to be spending time in the produce section of the store.
Are there websites where you can read up more about what some of these things really are?
Yeah, you probably could go to the USDA. I'm sure you can go to the USDA website and read about food labels. I think that would probably be a good starting point. I'd have to look at other places that you could get good information. But this was part of my nutritional training in graduate school and undergraduate, and it's been really fun to follow the history of food labels and to see how it's marketed. We have things like reduced fat on a label, or carb smart, and that's probably a subject for a different day. But that's all designed, reduced fat, I need to eat less fat, this must be good. Carb smart must be good. Well, there's a lot of cautions in that, and it's just a little bit of detective work, and it can be very enlightening.
Reduced fat might mean more sugar.
That's probably what it means. Yes. And that's really the key thing we're trying to be careful of, is the sugar and the carb intake.
Hey, thanks a lot. We'll have to do a little reading on the boxes.
You're welcome. I'm going to leave this with you today, just as a temptation.
I thought, will your vine in the garden grow more then? Is that?
Yeah, I hope not.
Okay, well, good. That's Dr. Tim McKnight this morning as we talk with the doc here on the BT Morning Show.